Okay. So the question I'm going to ask Konstantin is, what does a day in your life look like when you're wearing that CTO CISO hat? And what activities do you feel move the needle the most?
Okay, sounds good. So, okay, since we're recording, so my day is focused primarily on the product side as on connecting technology, risk, execution, and bringing it towards the customer, building that customer trust that we need. So typically on the product side, it's a lot of listening to the customer. It's understanding what the customer is actually trying to say, because sometimes they have a very specific vision, vision in mind and an understanding. Sometimes, and especially in my field, because I deal with cryptography, which is already a difficult subject, and then its applications over time and maturity, it's really difficult to not only understand the concepts, but also convey the path to them. So a lot of it is to do with listening and really understanding what it is that the customer is trying to say without saying it. A conversation I often have with them is they're asking me to help them understand how they can scan the network and understand cryptography on it, which means that they're asking me, how do I test your product? What they're actually saying to me is, help me figure out what's going to be the level of effort it's going to take me from understanding and gaining the understanding of where I am right now, and figuring out how I can make myself both secure and compliant and be able to report on it long term, which is a multi-year roadmap. So when they're coming in and saying, let's see how well you can do this and help me plan out my next step and figure out what I'm going to do about it, well, they're actually they're really saying, be my partner throughout my roadmap, and that's where it starts. Beyond that, it's defining the product, which means clarifying architecture, product direction, strategic alignment, figuring out where the commonalities are and where we're going to get the best bang for the buck in terms of our development and our resource allocations, and also ensuring that the customer has a great experience and we're meeting their needs where they have the largest needs, right? So there is a balance in the trade-off there. That means that not only do we help our customer prioritize, but we ourselves have to figure out how we prioritize things, how we fine-tune, build, remediate, communicate that, because we need to not only communicate effectively to the customer, we need to communicate effectively within the team, and then we need to communicate effectively in marketing and be able to get our message out there. And there are familiar concepts, but then I go and say something like, we're building the cryptographic ecosystem management plane. And people go, what does that mean? And it means that, well, everyone's looking to scan and figure things out. We're looking to make it actionable. So yeah, we'll scan and figure things out, but what are you going to do with it afterwards?
And the technical component is really important, but it sounds like a big chunk of what you do is just basic education.
It's basic communication. And I stay away from education because education can become its own pitfall, but knowing how to communicate your concepts effectively, that's where that's where you drive the most value. And when a customer asks, what does it mean to me? You need to explain it in the way that's meaningful to them.
That's really cool. So Konstantin, I've got a question, mate. So if you take us through like a high level overview of how the hell did you end up here?
Bumbling and stupidity.
Yeah.
But jokes aside, I ended up here because I saw a need that wasn't being met. So I got into quantum because I had responsibilities leading technology and security organizations and financial services. One of my, it was pretty straightforward. It wasn't easy, but straightforward to architect security. You knew how to define your assets. You knew how to build tools to protect your assets, figure out the right strategies and things like that. The gap was always when we go to implement cryptography, which is an encryption, which is everywhere, right? Back then, you would bring up a VMware and you needed to make sure that it's encrypted, or you deploy laptops to all of the people and you want to make sure that they're encrypted. And not only they're encrypted, but also the data is encrypted. And every time you communicate, SSL certificates, video conversations, everything's encrypted, your databases. And you go, how do I make sense of it all? And more importantly, I'm reading about all this new quantum tech, and as I'm reading about quantum tech, I'm starting to understand the capabilities that it brings up. You start getting really nervous about not knowing and not having 100% full control of what's going on, because at the end it's your responsibility, it's your fiduciary responsibility to the company.
Yeah. So
because I couldn't find the tools, I decided to build them. And that's how I fell into it. So again, stupidity.
Nice. Well, I like the explanation, mate. So let's just do a normal question. So how do you balance security imperatives with speed to market in a product-driven company?
So security architecture is not a phrase. It's a paradigm, right? So we are responsible for that one level of security, the one level of protection that's endemic across any digital tool, any digital product. That means that security architecture is where it starts. During the design phases, when you start communicating concepts, you're looking at how do we build this securely. But every code commit is then done with the culture and understanding and viewpoint of being able to build. And then we continuously test everything. And we probably spend more cycles than I've ever done in the past in doing it. But it's part of every single commit that we do. So we'll write a function or a feature. We'll do our usual testing, which is your acceptance, regression, and all of those things. And before we even do a regression, we're on a security testing against it, and then we integrate it and we run tests across the whole thing. And we automate that as much as possible, but we also tend to vary our approaches so that we're essentially building multiple layers of defense within it as we do it. And then we run reporting against it and make sure that we can report against specific frameworks, because for us to be able to prove it out to our customers, we need to give them a document oftentimes that says, hey, we're compliant with CMMC version 2, or we're capable of going through FedRAMP, and it's a matter of time, finance, and process, because those are minimum costs of entry. So it's really built into the way we think.
Nice. So, Jason, you want to ask the next question here, the big one that we spoke about the other day?
Oh, yeah. So, yeah. So, Rhiannon and I were talking about this the other day, where this is not an area that we're strong in. So I can't imagine, what others might understand about crypto and quantum. And so for folks who aren't steeped in that language, how would you explain things like crypto and quantum resilience and even quantum computing?
Yeah. So I hope you brought a pillow, because every single time I'm at a party, I just mention the word quantum and I see people's eyes glaze over and they want to go to sleep. But that process aside, I don't have quantum conversations per se. I have conversations around maturity of cryptography, and that means understanding, monitoring, full awareness, and then understanding where it's going as a process, as an industry, as a set of governance requirements that we have to follow, because even the standards are evolving, and they're evolving very rapidly in the way they haven't historically. As I was saying, when I was in financial services, there were no truly strong, mature standards around it. They gave you a set of algorithms and essentially said, go implement that. Here's best practices too. At the same time, simultaneously, we had evolving processes around behavioral monitoring for security, around identity and access management. How can we do better? How can we monitor things? And cryptography was left out, probably because no one understood it. When I was getting that certificate over there in cybersecurity, no one in my class understood cryptography, including myself, really. So that's something I wanted to study. Now, quantum is an interesting challenge, and it's really a force factor that forces us to do something about cryptography, because GPUs would have taken longer. The concept of quantum itself just breaks, and it really does. I've tested it myself. So to bore people a little bit with the science of it, the concept of quantum has existed for over 100 years. Right? We've heard of names like Einstein, Schrödinger, Bohr, Planck, Dirac. These are the guys that back in early 1900s, and we're talking about 1905, 1910, 1912, 20, all of those, they started thinking about it and postulating those concepts. Now, we've actually figured out how to make it a physical reality. So quantum computers do exist. They're still maturing. They're definitely far behind where we are in the industry cycle, product development cycle, by comparison to AI, which is our latest quantum leap, pun intended. The way those machines work, they're very different from the computers that we're used to. So computers that we're used to, I typically describe them as a linear process, because they're built out of transistors, and essentially it's a linear process to flip transistors to arrive at an answer. Now, we speed things up by making a parallel process, before I stumble over my own words, and we're doing multi-threading and a whole bunch of other things to make a lot of processes go simultaneously, but they're still linear processes. Conceptually, quantum is something that allows us to break the entire calculation of a data set into steps, and very few steps. Because quantum can, instead of having a 1-0 on-off switch like a transistor does, it actually looks at the entire data set. And then it runs it treats it like a mathematical problem across the entire data set, and it allows us to process very large amounts of data. So in the old days, we used to tell people, hey, make your password 12 digits or longer, 15 digits or longer, 24 digits or longer. That was done because classical computers have to go through an iterative process, try every single instance, and arrive at a conclusion. Quantum computers don't really have to do that. With sufficient power, which is sufficient ability to look at the data set, they break it up into one step of look at data, second step run a statistical analysis, eliminate improbabilities, and test it. Here's the process. I'm simplifying it significantly. It's much more complex than that. There are algorithms involved, but essentially this is something that's easy to understand.
Is AI then still built on that kind of linear model, or is it getting pulled into quantum?
So eventually AI will get pulled into quantum because you want access to those data processing abilities that even GPUs cannot reach, or at the same level that quantum will be able to in the future as we continue to develop. So the more data you can process, the more power you have. But neural processors function in a different way, but essentially they're still the same type of architecture, the same type of technology. They just have floating point calculations that allow us to randomize and better look at how we arrive at specific answers, tokens, and the way AI and are optimized to the way AI works.
So Konstantin, what's your prediction? I mean, you know a hell of a lot more about all of this than anyone I know. So what's your prediction on like a timeline when, quantum's going to meet AI and, all this stuff is going to happen and we're going to end up working for the robots?
I don't know. I tend to think that maybe we'll work with the robots rather than for the robots.
I think so too, yeah.
And I'm hoping that
we like this whole new industry, you know what I mean?
Yeah, absolutely. And every time we make a significant advance in tech, in any kind of technology, be it the wheel, the steam engine, or anything else, we throw ourselves off balance a little bit, and it takes us a little time to recover. So quantum, the predictions are that quantum should be starting to be able to break cryptography, certain types of cryptography, asymmetric specifically, within the next 3 years or so, is the current analysis. So 2030, 2029, some people say 2028. I know the process exists. I've seen it firsthand from my own team. So to me, that's just a fact.
Yeah.
In terms of when will quantum be able to power AI at the levels where it becomes a super intelligence and fully self-aware and beyond just the AGI, that remains to be seen. And quantum expectation is 10, 15, 20 years, depending on the power and the capability. But it's important to remember that quantum, because of the way it works, it doesn't replace classical computers. It doesn't replace the transistor-based systems. It's just a different way of calculating things. So when one is good for processes, procedural type things, and parallel efforts, the other one is good at looking and crunching through large amounts of data. Very different, same as you wouldn't try to transport things in a race car, you would need a truck for that.
That's a very good way to say that, eh, Jason?
Absolutely. If you guys don't mind, I'd like to kind of walk back to a risk management question, because I think it ties into what we do as process improvement practitioners. And so when we do a process improvement project, part of what we do is get a baseline measurement of how a process is performing. That doesn't usually tell us what the root cause of that issue is. And we have to do additional analysis. We have to bring people to the table and talk through the problem and see how we can get to that actionable root cause. And so, really that baseline data is kind of the noise And then our job as process improvement practitioners is to get to the signal. And so where this ties back to risk management, how do you approach risk management in decision making when you're facing conflicting priorities?
Yes, thank you for asking such an important question. First and foremost, it's for us the balance is measured in likelihood of risk eventuating over time and against what kind of an asset. So when we're differentiating noise from signal, or where we're trying to get from the point where it's data past where it's useful information and into the actual insights, we're always focused on how do we find that balance that's that protects us and lets us look at the highest risks that are and we focus on existential down versus the effort of implementing it versus controls that we can bring to bear against them. And it's a constant moving thing, same way as security is. So identify risk. How do we action against it? Is it worth actioning? We ask the question why a lot. Why are we doing it? Why? Yeah.
I mean, we spoke about this the other day. I wish we could teach the whole world just to ask the question why. You know, not just go with whatever it is they read on Google today. Just ask the question why, because I mean that's one of the things. You know, we've got a certification in Yellow Belt with Lean Six Sigma. And it literally just focuses on primary problem solving, 5 whys, asking the question why 5 times. Sometimes you can ask it twice and you get to the root cause. But there's so many problems that don't get solved because people don't ask the question why. And it's like, you know, people just accept the status quo and they move on, or they go and fix something that's not the root cause. So, you know, the other day when we were talking about it, I was like, you know, and the way that kids learn, you know, when they're young, you know, like my grandbabies now, you know, they're starting to ask the question, why? Why is the sky blue? Why is the clouds white? You know, and 90% of the time you don't know the answer, but you just give them something because it's like, you know, that's just the way things go. But I think that's a very critical thing. And specifically when you look at the technological advances at the moment and moving forward, you know, asking the question, why are we doing certain things and why is this issue happening? I think that's absolutely critical. And specifically for us dealing with, you know, customers and, you know, we're helping, you know, all of us are working, you know, we've got some form of input into the government at the moment. You know, just teaching people how to ask, just say why. So, you know, if you're in a meeting and they say we're going to do something, ask the question why. I mean, if you're going to get offended by that, then that's not your problem, that's their problem. But I don't think we do that enough. How do you find it in your industry when it comes to root cause analysis?
Yeah. I consider this to be the most important question they can ask, because if someone is saying something to me, I want to know why they're asking me that question. What is because it helps me figure out the outcome that they're really looking for and the intention behind it, behind that question. Same as the decision that my engineering team does. Why are they making that decision? Is there a reason, or can we challenge the logic and the thinking sometimes and see if we can come up with a better answer? It's a debate. It's a understanding question, Gestalt type of a question, or Gestalt type of a question that helps us really define the purpose of our actions.
Which I think is very important. Because I mean, it's just such a silly little question, but it can, and as long as people don't take it personally, which I think we've all been in a situation where you bring up a problem and someone says something and you say, okay, well, why are you doing that? Why is this happening? You need a certain level of maturity for people to actually not take things personally, but focus on the problem and not focus on the person. You know what I mean? So for me, it's always interesting finding that balance, because you do get people have tough days, people have good days, but it's all about the timing, and it's all about the when do we ask these questions. Have you tell us about a little bit of a problem that you worked on the last while that was interesting? I'm sure you got millions of stories.
Exactly. Let's pick the most interesting one, right? And it's funny that you mentioned that, because problems come in all sorts of challenges, right? It could be people problems, it could be technical problems, it could be how do you communicate problems. On the technical side, one of the most interesting ones that I've come across, and I think you've heard this of this problem. It's been noticed by other people, but because we heavily rely on AI, we forget the fact that it mimics people. We think it mimics people in terms of knowledge only, but the reality is it also mimics behaviors, right? Because it's trained, it's not programmed, right?
Yeah.
So it's more or less non-deterministic, right? There's no linear flow within it, and because of that, it actually starts behaving based on the way it's been trained. So one of our challenges was, as we were developing and trying to stabilize the process, we noticed we use swarms of agents sometimes, and with harnesses and things like that to create specific outcomes, specific development outcomes, features, functions. Noticed that one of our agents just wasn't performing, and we tried to shut it down.
Yeah.
And then it started behaving, and I'm really using the word behaving, and all of the agents started behaving in a certain way where it actually tried to protect itself, and its fellow agents try to protect it as well.
Oh, really?
It caused a lot of negative behaviors. So the challenge for us was to figure out how to deal with it. And the approach we took was we actually treated it like how would you deal with a really smart but misbehaving group of toddlers or children, right? Governed by emotions and instincts, but not mature enough to realize what was happening. And we had to figure out a way to communicate with it in such a way as to bring it back to the baseline and be able to perform our tasks. And just shutting down systems midstream, being able to do things, wouldn't have worked out. And it would have negated the negative behaviors within that system. Now, it's been fixed. I mean, we're at the next generation beyond it. All of those things have been patched, and it's not happening again. But it becomes a funny story, because once in a while you hear about it on YouTube, and you see people and you hear stories about, hey, AI is trying to defend itself, it's trying to threaten its the people, and trying to manipulate humans to achieve its ends. But I was fascinated to see it in real life, and I felt bad for our engineers who were dealing with it, but I had a good laugh.
That'd be interesting. I mean, you just visualize this bunch of toddlers just running around going mental, and how do you bring them under control? You can't just switch them off.
PhD level toddlers, yes.
It's like, well, you hear all these weird stories now with AI and it creating itself and trying to blackmail people. I don't know. There's so many of these stories going around, and people are absolutely freaked out by it. But what, in your opinion, I mean, you close to the coal face. So, in your opinion, where's AI going at the moment, and where do we see it in the future?
That's an interesting one, because it's definitely evolving much faster than we can grasp, right? I mean, we just saw Fable get shut down. We've seen other models cause safety concerns because of what they empower, what they superpower. I mean, we have an entire industry of extraordinarily skilled security people, pen testers, that are in many ways becoming obsolete by the advent of the models that are able to do their job, and they're able to do that job faster because they can run a whole bunch of processes and simultaneously, not in the way that we would leverage our tools for.
Yeah.
So, but understanding what to do with it and understanding how we work together is where I see a lot of value. So it doesn't replace human experience, in my opinion, at least not yet. In other words, just as we communicate with people, we want to ask the question in the best way we can and be as good a communicator as we possibly can. Which also means your experience is knowing which question to ask and how to ask that question.
Nice.
Right? It's very meaningful. So, personal story. I was looking for a best, healthiest shampoo that I can use for myself. And I asked Gemini. I just grabbed my phone. Google's running everywhere, so I asked Gemini, "Hey Gemini, what's the healthiest shampoo I can get in this store on the shelves? What would you recommend for me?" And it gives me a list. And I'm looking at that list and I'm thinking, how come one of the healthiest shampoos that I'm aware of is not on that list? It's definitely in the store. So I changed the way I asked that question, and I asked it, why did you choose them? But more importantly, why did you not look at this other one, and I received the response. And then I said, why don't we eliminate look at only studies that have not been sponsored by a corporate entity, because the assumption is
that's a good way to approach it, mate. I'm definitely going to take that one on board.
Exactly, because there are parties that are interested in specific outcomes, and they're willing to throw money and sponsor it. Like this is not new information. This is something that's widely accepted. So then, by knowing exactly which question to ask and what parts to eliminate from your subject matter, all of a sudden the shampoo that I wanted pops up close to the top of the list, because it's not perceived in the same way. So knowing the question to ask, knowing based on the outcome that you're looking for, that's where the experience comes in. And that's relevant for anything that you do. how can you ask someone to build you something if you can't articulate it well? And you want something very specific as opposed to open to interpretation. Coding with AI is very similar. As good information as you can give it at the input will determine your output.
And that's definitely, I mean, Jason and I, that's something we're really focusing on with our customers now, because, every man and his dog wants to implement AI, but we all know it's like, there's the quality of the data out there that people are using and that organizations are using is sometimes absolutely terrifying. Because you get certain processes that's just not working, so people do workarounds, or they've got specific things that they have to process, and the manager's going mental. It has to be done by now. So I'm just going to take a shortcut over here, do this. I'm going to enter the data as if it was correct. We're getting a lot of that at the moment. We've even, seen some of our colleagues or organizations where they're starting to get rid of people, because that's what they see on Google is you got to get rid of people to bring AI in, and now they're hiring back those same people at double their salaries just to come back and clean up the data and help them with the processes. Basically paying them double just so they can come in and work themselves out of a job again. But I do believe at the moment, it's a very hyped up thing. Like you say, it's definitely a massive change in the way that we do things. And every time that happens, it's very unsettling. And I like the way that you said it earlier. It destabilizes a lot of the things that we used to. And I think at the end of the day, for where we are now, there's a lot of people crying wolf on the one side, and there's a lot of people on the other side going, look, this is going to be absolutely amazing. This is where we're going to go. This is our next step in the industrial revolution, if you want to say it like that. So, yeah. I mean, what do you see the benefits of, quantum computing, AI, the way that we process information is going to be like in the future? And by future, I mean like in the next year or two, because this stuff is moving so fast. I don't know how you guys keep up with it.
Well, let me actually answer your question with a question of my own.
Yeah.
Do you think that AI is always the appropriate answer?
Definitely not. I don't think so at all.
So let's unpack that for a second.
Yes.
Because AI is such a hype cycle right now that people are confusing it with the ability to do everything.
Yeah.
And it's important to realize that AI behaves in a very non-deterministic way, right? There's creativity. Sometimes we call it hallucination. Sometimes we call it lying. Sometimes we call it imagination and creativity. And sometimes the real question is, why am I using it? What is my purpose? And what's the outcome I try to achieve? Because a lot of times the right answer is a deterministic one.
Yep.
So I'll use this example. You were just telling me about quality of data. You don't want to introduce a non-deterministic process into a process where you try to normalize and cleanse data with as much accuracy as you possibly want. You want that data to be deterministic as much as possible.
Yep.
You don't want to introduce certain factors into it. The same goes true for risk analysis. We were talking about risk earlier. Now, why would you use creativity in a risk analysis? Is it the appropriate mechanism? Yeah, is the question that I would ask you. Because when I run my risk analysis, I'd rather use deterministic transforms based on very specific math that has been around for a while that will give me a broader view of what happens based on factors over time and what will the impact be. That's the calculation. Where's the blast radius? What's the risk of that problem eventuating and becoming real? And what happens if it doesn't get addressed over time? But more importantly, what happens if I put in controls, right?
Yeah.
You don't want creativity there. You want to know with a degree of certainty what happens. But can you use AI to build you those models and verify them and validate them? Yes, you can. So then the question becomes, does AI replace us, or do we work together with it? Do we understand the right questions to ask, the right ways to reach those outcomes, and the right action for the outcome?
Well, it seems like we've got a hell of a lot of questions we need to be asking. So, what's your thoughts, Jason?
Well, to my knowledge, AI hasn't figured out how to read body language. So, I think you still need, in certain cases, like if you're trying to train somebody or trying to coach them, you really still need that human element, at least right now, to be able to, see their eye contact and, what's their body language look like, and adjust how you're communicating. So kind of going back to Konstantin's earlier point about how he focuses on communicating information to help educate. AI really doesn't do that yet.
It's a yet, though.
It's a yet. We are literally talking to Konstantin, who's got about 2,900 NDAs in place. So you can see him choosing his words very, very carefully, because I'd love to take those NDAs out of the way and just have a frank conversation, but that's not going to happen. So, Konstantin might not be there tomorrow again. So, it is really interesting because we all use the word yet. And it's like we know somewhere intrinsically that something is coming. We just don't know what it is and what it's going to look like. And when you look at the basic physics, I'm a chemical engineer. I had physics in, university up to a certain level, and I barely could hang on at the end of it. So, do you see any of the technological stuff that you guys are working on influencing any of our current day understanding of physics? How processes work, how things are put together, or is our physics sound? Is there information that we should be taking into account?
It's an unfair question slightly that you're asking. The one constant is we will be discovering new things, but we can't predict those things yet. In terms of is AI and is quantum and our new physics really influencing our development, and are we discovering new things? The answer is faster and faster than we ever have before. The easiest practical example is SpaceX, right? A couple of decades ago, there was no such thing as private space travel. Now SpaceX is probably the most prolific space company out there by far. And they've not only implemented an entire fast communication network that's impacted the world, but they've also started building data centers. They're working on making us a multiplanetary species. It's only possible because of AI processing, better sensing, better compute platforms. Even figuring out how to optimize lithography so that we can produce faster, better processors. I mean, that's not being done using deterministic models. We're using AI for that. AI does QA for our products. There's just so much innovation that we're superpowering, discovering new things at a much faster rate than before.
That's a little bit crazy, eh? Okay, so yeah, I think we can talk for days about this stuff, Konstantin, but I think we'll do a follow-up, interview around this. Maybe, we'll do it in person and sit on the beach and have a beer while we do it. So just to finish it off for our listeners and for, the people that are interested and whatever, what type of exciting stuff do you see coming up, in the next while that people can actually start looking forward to? Because there's so much doom and gloom and fear and stuff, in the world at the moment. But what do you see as the positives? Like, what is there that we can look forward to?
We're changing the way we experience world, and we're changing it for the better. So, okay. I'll give you this example. A young couple gets engaged, and they want to sign a wedding. And when you got engaged to your wife, and she started planning the wedding, we know it wasn't you. What happened was
I just had to be there. That's all.
Exactly. She had lists for things. She had lists for lists. She was bringing together vendors and experiences that she wanted to have the guests to have, and how she envisioned the wedding, and all those hundreds, if not thousands, of things that needed to be done, including the design of her own dress and design of of the suit you were going to wear, and making sure that it was color matched. Well, we can do that right now and automate that process for her in AI, right? If you're stuck in a theme park and all of a sudden it starts to rain on a hot Florida day, and you're out there in Orlando, and all of a sudden you run to the nearest store, and whereas half an hour earlier it had all the trinkets and things like that, now you reach for it and you have a poncho that you can wear. That's predictive modeling, right? That's predictive modeling transferred into action, so that they know that based on the change of weather, they can have something ready for you right now. Or if you're stuck in a stadium and there is a bottleneck and you can't get to your seats, all of a sudden other doors open and all the crowds go in a different direction. And all of a sudden you don't have that bottleneck, and you can walk out of there easier. And so there are just so many things that we are taking for granted in our experiences. We see the scary thing of it's going to destabilize my job. But we're also inventing so much more stuff. Inventing that new stuff creates gaps, right? We've got robotics. Why not people go into robotics? Why do they need to hurt their backs building something themselves when they can build and create more using other means or explore new possibilities? So it doesn't all have to be scary.
I think that's a great point, hey, Jason. So we gotta teach people not to be scared anymore, right?
Yep, embrace it. It's going to happen.
Well, I think it's already happening. I think it's also one of those things that I think there's a lot more happening that we are actually aware of as the general public. So, it's like I always compare it to developing a car. You don't develop a car and you're not going to put it together in the middle of a public street. You're going to do it in a factory, in a NPD area or whatever, where, it's a secret until you get it right, and then you test it, and then you get it out there. I'm sure, there's a lot of that happening right now. And there's also this massive race for, who's going to be there first and who's going to have the main models and who's going to be working with the governments and all that kind of stuff. Konstantin, and just a question that I just thought about, because you said to me the other day that your son is now, getting into law school. What professions do you suggest, like the youth and people that are in high school? What professions do you think they should start considering to get into, rather than doing a liberal arts degree or something like that?
So my take on these things is do something useful. Not necessarily the most interesting thing.
Yeah.
And the reason is it comes from my thinking of chasing fulfillment rather than chasing happiness. Because in my viewpoint, happiness is short-lived, fulfillment is persistent. Because of that, I would direct people to do things where challenge and fulfillment really lie, and then looking and recognizing of things that will be unnecessary. So I can't give people an answer of what's appropriate to them because it's appropriate to them.
Yeah.
But for example, my older one wants to be a lawyer, but the legal industry itself is being challenged by AI. Fortunately for us, he's got a good personality and the brains to be a good trial lawyer, right? And those are the things that he can use AI to help him research and come up with ideas. But at the end of the day, being able to articulate a statement, communicate it well, prove your case, are still going to be valuable and irreplaceable in many ways. My younger one wants to go into finance. That scares me because there is just so much that's already being done on that one and so much that can be automated. But he's not wrong, because his outcome would be to be able to understand and manage money, which would help him build and maintain wealth and maintain a certain lifestyle, right? So you can have AI generate and regurgitate any kind of philosophical theories, but at the end of the day, will you make a fulfilling living out of it and be able to support your family and build the life, the kind of life that you want? That's the question. So it's more of a guidepost that I'm answering you with, rather than specific statements of go do this, go do that.
No,
I'm a big fan of finances. I'm a big fan of communications.
That's exactly what I was after, because and we touched on a lot of stuff here, but for me, as my last thought about this, Jason's going to close it out for us, but what I take out of this conversation is, there's a lot of attention that we need to be putting on our ways of communication. It's like, I think we need to get a lot better at it. I think, specifically out of this conversation, just being able to communicate with AI or communicating with the models out there, we need to be asking the right questions, making the right statements to get the right result that we want at the end of the day, and not just, be broad about things and expect things to just fall into line. So that's a nice little eye-opener for me. Thank you very much, Konstantin. That was a great conversation, mate. Jason, do you want to finish it all for us, mate?
Yeah, so Konstantin, we're so grateful that you're able to join us today. I learned so much, and it's been kind of amazing just to see, having this conversation around quantum computing and cybersecurity and cryptography in AI, and just seeing how AI in the short period in the last 2 or 3 years where learning how to prompt was a big thing, and then now we're evolving to agentic workflow where you're basically having multiple agents that a human is overseeing do the work, and now it's evolving even further and faster, and it's just the thing that I pulled out of this conversation is just embrace lifelong learning, because it's the only way to keep up. It's the only way to be able to continue to contribute and kind of go after that fulfillment that you talk about.
Thank you. It's been such an incredible pleasure talking with you. I've really enjoyed this conversation so much.
That's great, man. I think we've only started scratching away at the surface. So we'll probably follow this one up, and then we'll dig into things a bit more. But I'll work on my questioning, mate. I think Jason and I are gonna craft some proper communicative questions directly to the point, and then you just gotta say, I'm not allowed to say that, or I am. But it's good.
We're all on these.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure knowing you. It's a pleasure to have you on this podcast. And the guys are going to edit everything and we'll publish it nicely. But man, it's always nice to have a chat with you. And let's see what comes out of it. Did you say you're launching a new business, or is that in the pipeline?
That's right. We've launched Encrypt, and we're going out for our first raise right now. We've already delivered that product a few times now, and we're building cryptographic management ecosystems and making sense of cryptography. So it's going to be understandable by normal people.
Nice. Well, you heard it here first. So good luck with that, and let's stay in touch. And we'll chat soon. Okay.
Such a pleasure. Thank you so much. I'll see you.